Thank you all for joining us for the CUCSA year-end workgroup presentations. We'll now hear from our Sustainable Workforce Workgroup, sharing their findings and recommendations. I'm pleased to introduce Workgroup Chair Kristen Ikeda Yoza.
Thank you, Greta. Welcome everybody to the Sustainable Workforce Workgroup presentation for the 2025-2026 cycle. I would like to start by introducing my workgroup members, Rebekah Fernandez from the Office of the President, Jeff Heiser from UC Davis, Paige Mejia from UC Riverside, Javier Miramontes from UC A&R, and Katie Urbanowich from UC Berkeley. Over the past year, our cross-location team has investigated the critical operational and cultural stressors affecting the UC staff. Today, we will share our data-driven insights, actionable framework designs to stabilize our workforce, optimize efficiency through technology, and clarify career pathways during a period of unprecedented strain. To tackle the broad concept of workforce sustainability, leadership directed us to focus on 4 distinct charges. We looked at the macro level of enrollment versus funding, the micro level of how individual staff communicate burnout, the technological level, how AI can safely help us, and finally, the structural level, how we retain talent through career pathways, transparent hiring platforms. Let's start our first charge with Katie Urbanowich from UC Berkeley.
Thank you, Kristen. As part of the supporting staff through strategic growth charge, we reviewed how to navigate capacity constraints, systemic workload imbalances, and the impacts of understaffing on morale and retention. From our research, we found that over the past 25 years, student enrollment across the UC system has increased by 78%. However, in that same period of time, core funding, which largely supports staff compensation and benefits, has decreased by 40%. As a result, there has been a 20% decrease in the staff-to-student ratio. Considering that the UC capacity plan promises enrollment growth through at least 2030, and that UC is currently in a period of significant budget constraints, we anticipate that the enrollment of students will continue to outpace the hiring of staff, which will further broaden the gap between the number of staff and students, impacting the level of service and support that can be provided by each campus. Through our review, we also found that UC does not have a standard pathway for staff to communicate when they are overburdened or working outside of their actual job description and responsibilities. That often comes down to the individual employee and the relationship they have with their manager. Additionally, there has been a recent increase in staff being accredited in 2 different unions. In reviewing PPSM 30 and the various collective bargaining agreements, we found that the majority of staff represented by unions are entitled to pay for higher level work after 15 days. However, non-represented policy-covered staff must work 30 days before being eligible for additional pay. This discrepancy will only become more impactful as more staff titles are accredited. Without intervention, we anticipate staff, particularly non-represented staff, will continue to be asked to do more and more in their roles to support the growing student population without having a defined method of indicating when they're overworked. This will likely lead to low morale, burnout, and increased employee turnover, ultimately affecting the university's operational effectiveness and service quality. And so, we have 3 recommendations for the university. The first is proactive recruitment funding. This recommendation is in support of Associate Vice President of Budget Analysis and Planning, Cain Diaz's advocacy to provide campuses with funding a year in advance of enrollment increases to ensure adequate time for hiring and other salary actions. The second recommendation is that each campus's senior leadership formally support a less with less mentality, empowering teams to strictly focus on mission-critical priority work. And lastly, that each campus increases transparency with regards to staff engagement and staff experience surveys. Through our research, we found that the majority of campuses do not publish staff survey results, and so we could not incorporate that data into our review. That being said, having more transparency about what's actually going on in each individual campus will allow for a broader understanding of the UC staff experience as a whole. I will now turn it over to Javier Miramontes from UCANR.
Thank you, Katie. I'll go ahead and read the charge. So supporting staff to strategic growth, establish supportive guidelines that allow staff to assess their workload capacity and communicate when they are at or over capacity. When assessing this, it was really important to look at this from a staff and supervisor perspective. A question that arose: is there an existing resource at the UC that can be utilized to begin a formal conversation around workload capacity that could be used either by a staff or a supervisor? I also took into consideration the staff person who might have a complex working relationship with their supervisor and might be searching for a formal tool to utilize during check-ins that is formally sponsored by the UC. For my research, I reviewed 8 UC campuses plus UCOP. I mostly reviewed websites that are made available to all staff. I also consulted with my local human resource office about how, as a supervisor, I can support my direct reports if they felt overwhelmed from job duties. Across the board, all UC campuses offered wellness programs that staff can tap into that dealt with either work-related or personal issues. The supervisor would be able to offer their direct reports with a menu of services depending on staff needs. So 2 examples that I wanted to provide is UC Davis Ombuds, and this is from their website. The UC Davis Ombuds Office is a confidential, independent, impartial, and informal problem-solving and conflict management resources for all members. Another one that I wanted to highlight is UC Merced Insight. So Insight offers employees and their household members 3 counseling sessions every 6 months with a licensed professional to assist with work-life concerns. On a personal note, I have personally utilized the services of UC Davis Ombuds and found it to be very helpful, and have also recommended it to my team as well. So for the evaluation programs, all UC locations recommended a check-in process in relation to a performance evaluation, with some being more formal than others. A lot of us are familiar with this process. Either we do this as a supervisor or our supervisor does it with us. One example that I wanted to highlight was UC Irvine. So for UC Irvine, they have the Aligned Performance program, promotes 2-way conversations between staff and leaders, requires only 2 check-ins per year. Another one that's offered across all UC campuses because it's sponsored by UCOP is the UC Experience Conversations. It's recommended to be held once a year. Both the supervisor and direct reports select questions from that. So some of the identified gaps that we had is there is no inconsistent form across all UC that staff can utilize when they feel they are out over capacity. So some of the current challenges is conversations are informal and inconsistent. Employees may hesitate to raise concerns. Supervisors' responses vary by management style, and workload concerns may go undocumented. To continue with this section, I will pass it over to Kristen Ikeda Yoza from UC Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Javier. Our targeted recommendation is to develop and pilot a system-wide workload concern capacity check form. This is not a performance evaluation, but an objective tool that allows employees to lay out their bandwidth and explicitly point out where they are bottlenecked and require a supervisor to collaborate in a written time-bound action plan. This protects both parties and ensures workload management is data-driven and uniform across the UC. This work group actually built 2 concrete deliverables ready for deployment. The first is the Departmental Operating Capacity Assessment. This worksheet features a critical max to help map out duties, manage change, and streamline processes. It also introduces a traffic light protocol, as you see here. Green signals stable staffing, and we can focus on our projects and work. Yellow will signal tight resources, a possible pause on some projects, and a shift to communication for extended response times. When a department hits red due to vacancies or budget constraints, for example, the manager has an objective pre-approved framework to officially pause non-essential services. It also will include a compliance check to ensure we don't actually accidentally breach any grant or union contracts. The second document is our one-on-one template that focuses on psychological safety rather than numerical output. This tool points to addressing staff and supervisor concerns, building a supportive action plan, and reviewing goals, as well as the career development and encouraging two-way communication. This could be conducted on a monthly or bi-weekly basis, which would be left up to the manager, supervisor, and staff person. Our three operational recommendations are highly cost-effective. Instead of funding brand new initiatives, we recommend marketing existing system-wide policies such as PSBSM 30 and PSBSM 50 to encourage professional development that aligns with UC's goals of continuous learning and workforce development. Second, we need executive leadership to visibly endorse frameworks like the traffic light protocol so managers feel safe scaling back services and streamlining processes when faced with constraints to workflow. Finally, we need clear upskilling guidelines for approved AI tools to safely eliminate administrative toil without creating cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And now, Rebekah Fernandez from the Office of the President.
Thank you, Kristen. We surveyed the CUCSA delegation to collect data from their respective locations to assess the level of equitable access to AI tools to enable employees to optimize their work capacity. The collective responses revealed clear structural equity gaps. The first is insufficient access. Tool availability and licensing structures vary drastically by location. Access to cutting-edge efficiency tools depends entirely on which campus or location an employee works for. In terms of funding barriers, high-tier enterprise-grade AI is restricted by local budget constraints and multi-layered approvals. Due to budget silos and fragmented adoption, some staff are significantly disadvantaged in their ability to deploy AI to automate routine tasks. And lastly, siloed approaches. Decentralized adoption, not only system-wide, but within locations, creates a system of tech haves and tech have-nots across the UC. To close these gaps, we recommend a three-pronged approach to ensure safe and equitable tech adoption. The first is centralizing resources. This would entail creating a UCOP-hosted directory linking to AI policies that apply across UC locations, as well as location-specific implementation guidelines that can be leveraged by other locations, other UC locations, to facilitate a more consistent application of AI policies and guidelines. In regard to closing the equity gap, our recommendation is the establishment of a minimum baseline as to the degree to which AI is deployed across UC locations in terms of breadth and depth, so that employees that can benefit from the deployment of AI tools to optimize their work capacity are not left behind. One scenario that has emerged is a lack of support by one or more levels of management that might be resistant to AI deployment for their team, creating a group of employees that will fall behind their UC peers. And finally, to support safe adoption of AI tools, in addition to the central policy and guidelines repository, expansion of AI training to upskill staff to appropriately interact with AI tools, use of authorized tools to ensure data protection versus readily available personal AI products, having appropriate AI tools widely available, leadership and management support for adoption across UC that reaches the employees that can benefit from AI adoption, and ultimately providing the pathway for teams and individuals to be properly trained on how to work individually and collaboratively as the new technology changes how we work. AI proficiency will enable employees to optimize their workflows while minimizing data risks. And now, Jeff Heiser from UC Davis.
Thank you so much, Rebekah. Our final charge had to do with programs and pathways. First, programs pertaining to career development. To understand the availability, accessibility, and perceived value of professional development across the system, We looked at system-wide policies, including PPSM 50, the professional development leave, and PPSM 51, time off for university activities. We evaluated the current professional development tools available on UCNet and across different locations. And we finally looked at data from the Management Skills Assessment Program and cross-referenced with the Staff Experience Survey against industry benchmarks. And here's what we discovered. The UC has an abundance of professional development courses and opportunities across the system for staff, yet long-term career competence is 11% below the national average. Why? Because supervisors can sometimes act as the primary gatekeeper or approval person for staff to access those professional development opportunities. Research suggests that a primary barrier to development is a lack of active managerial support. Manager support for development tends to be a lower ranked area in the UC Staff Experience Survey. Studies from Gallup show that if a manager doesn't explicitly support growth, an employee is 58% more likely to look for a job outside of their employer. And finally, time scarcity. Staff feel that they don't have permission to use their professional development release time. Workloads, time constraints, and reduced staffing and other demands often take precedent. Development needs to be promoted as essential to our jobs as our job duties. To bridge the value gap that we just discussed, we are proposing 3 targeted high-impact recommendations to help structuralize career development support across the UC system. First, we must formalize leadership messaging. Staff feel they need permission to grow, so we recommend deploying standardized CHRO email templates during annual review seasons that explicitly normalize the use of PPSM 50 release time. This removes the burden from the employee and signals top-down support for professional development. Second, we need to expand skill benchmarking. We should partner directly with UC workforce planning to help them to move some of their existing ideas and programs forward, specifically around assessment platforms. This allows staff to objectively map their technical skills, particularly in emerging areas like AI, and then receive personalized coaching on how to bridge the gap between where they want to be and the skills that they currently have. And finally, most importantly, we must embed coaching into our core metrics. Retention is driven by behavioral feedback, not just courses. We recommend integrating the UC staff experience conversations and coaching modules as weighted required metrics and the annual performance reviews for all UC supervisors. By holding managers accountable for their team's growth, we move from development from being a nice to have to being a core institutional priority. And finally, we looked at the UC job board. We conducted a comparative review of UC campuses and CSU job boards, and we found that CSU do not have job postings older than a month or 2, while UC campuses have job postings that go much further back. We cross-referenced with system-wide and campus-level postings. The campus job boards feed into the system-wide job board. Therefore, one of the issues lies at the campus level of updating their job boards. We identified some delays in posting closures process, and it's usually with the hiring managers not providing the necessary documentation on time. And we also interviewed HR Director Sarah Dillon on recruitment workflows and compliance requirements. Some of our findings included the UC job board postings often remain active far after the positions are filled. Often these outdated postings create what's termed ghost vacancies. The public-facing data does not always reflect real-time hiring activity, and there's often major bottlenecks occurring between compliance and documentation phase. Staffing shortages and administrative workload can contribute to these delays. But we do have a great model with a large system that the CSU that it is possible to have timely removal, updated job boards so that people know exactly what they're potentially looking for. So some of our recommendations, we want to conduct some stakeholder listening sessions with HR and hiring managers to find out what are some of the constraints that are holding them back from updating their job postings. We also want to implement automated reminders for required documentation if available. We'd like to explore some Gen AI supported workload notifications if approved for the hiring process, and add some different markers such as under offer or selection made to help help job seekers have a more accurate view of what's available, and continue to improve the alignment between compliance and board accuracy. We think that all of these recommendations will help job seekers, both internally and externally, have a better idea of what's available at locations across the system. And now I'll pass it back to Kristen for our conclusion.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to say thank you to all my work group members for their hard work and dedication over the last year. And finally, to close, achieving a sustainable workforce comes down to 3 strategic pillars. First, we must protect our people by formalizing how we communicate workload and giving managers permission to pause non-essential tasks. Second, we must equip them via innovation, ensuring every staff member has equitable, safe access to administrative AI tools. And finally, we must retain our talent by building a culture of coaching and a transparent, reliable career pathway across the UC system. Thank you so much. For more information, be sure to see our full work group report that is linked in the video description below. We would love to discuss our recommendations with you at the CUCSA Town Hall on Tuesday, July the 7th at 11 a.m. For full details, they are available on the website at cucsa.ucla.edu, or you're welcome to email any questions about our recommendations to me at the email included in the description. Thank you so much.